Hello everyone, and welcome to Understanding Lyme Disease. I'm Dr. Adam Seay. Many of you are probably watching this video and not really sure what Lyme disease is. Well, I'm here to tell you this is a disease that affects millions of people and they don't even know it. Countless doctors are not sure what Lyme disease really is because the testing for it is so hard to find. Yet many times over, there's a plethora of diseases and conditions that are associated with this that are going undetected because people do not know about Lyme disease. Doctors don't know about Lyme disease. Well, with this video, I hope to enlighten you as to what Lyme is and ways that you can overcome this. Many people have autoimmune conditions and they think this is what I have. I have MS, I have fibromyalgia, I have Hashimoto's. And yet, many times Lyme is implicated, but many doctors don't know about it. So hopefully with this video you'll understand more about it and if this applies to you. To give you a little bit of background about Lyme disease, it is caused by the spirochete bacteria Borrelia. In the United States, the most common spirochete is Borrelia burgdorferi. It is typically what is found on Elisa and Western blot. Other species of Borrelia exist and are gaining growth in the United States. These include Alfezi, Guarini, and Miyamoti. These are other species or strains of Borrelia that are becoming more prevalent in the United States. Acute symptoms can include flu-like symptoms where you're going to have fever, chills, headache, fatigue. You can even get swollen lymph nodes and joint and muscle pains. Chronic symptoms are vast but include nerve pain, numbness, tingling, heart palpitations, and memory problems. So there's a whole host of issues that can show up as a result of this. So let's look at the incidences of Lyme that's reported by the CDC in the United States. The number of cases reported for 2014 were 33,461. However, the CDC reports that only 10% of cases are actually reported from states to the CDC. So if we took that number and actually gave it the true number, true representation, it translates into 334,610 cases annually. So as you can see, this is a big problem for people and it's going undetected. And this is what's found in the horrible testing that's done through the FDA, which is what they, or the CDC, is how they find Lyme, which is a Western blot. And Lyme has become the fastest growing infectious disease right now. The transmission of Lyme is usually through what most people associate a tick, in particular the Ixodes scapularis, which is the black-legged tick. However, all ticks can carry Lyme disease. So they used to think it's just the deer tick, but they're finding it's all ticks now. And some research is demonstrating that Lyme is present in other biting insects, such as spiders, mosquitoes, biting flies. In some cases, one will see a bullseye rash, which is pathognomonic for Lyme, meaning you don't have to test that to see if you have it. It's usually what Lyme gives you. It's called erythema migrans, is the technical term. And if you don't always have to get a bullseye rash to end up with Lyme disease. So this is a very common issue that most people associate. Well, I didn't have a bullseye rash, I must be okay, must not have Lyme, and that's just false. The transmission of Lyme disease is typically done by the nymph, and the nymph is the smallest component that carries it. It carries the most, and is about the size of a poppy seed or a period at the end of a sentence. So this is one that a lot of times goes undetected or looks just like a little mole that you have. Lyme disease can be transferred to individuals via sperm, vaginal fluid, and in utero. Even though some of the research doesn't confirm that, we're seeing it in people. So we're just not there yet with some of the technology of understanding this fully, but a lot of times you'll see this thing move through households. Many times people do not ever recall having been bitten by a tick at all. And can have symptoms that resemble Lyme disease, but yet no one ever brings that up. And part of that too could be if we're seeing these in mosquitoes, how often do people get mosquito bites during the spring and summer? So let's look at some diseases that mimic Lyme. There can be fibromyalgia. This is very, very common. If you've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, you should seriously consider looking at Lyme disease. Chronic fatigue syndrome, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, you can be bipolar. You can have anxiety, depression, migraines. We also see multiple sclerosis, ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, degenerative joint disease, degenerative disc disease in the spine, Bell's palsy, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is autoimmunity to your thyroid. You can have heart problems, SVTs, you can have murmurs, arrhythmias, fibrillation, palpitations. All these things are very common with Lyme. You can have vertigo, you can have cystitis as well. So how do you detect Lyme disease? This is a very difficult thing because most doctors want to default to a blood test or a lab test. And I always tell patients, lab tests rule in, they don't rule out Lyme disease. Lyme disease is not a diagnosis made on a lab test. The tendency of medicine, again, is to rule out Lyme disease with a blood test, and you just cannot do it. This thing is so difficult to find, you just can't do it. However, this thinking leads to an inaccurate diagnosis. Lab tests should rule in, not rule out. Medicine tests for Lyme through a Lyme and a Western blot, and this test, again, has a 50 to 70% false negative. You have a 50-50 shot flipping a coin, so you can see how horrible this test is, but this is the gold standard according to the CDC for finding Lyme. So again, of those cases that were reported, only 10% were actually being reported to the CDC, and that's from this test. And you can see this is really a big problem we have on our hands. More accurate tests can be performed through the following. We use some of these in my office. The I-spot Lyme is a memory T cell response that looks at the response of the T cell to see does the T cell light up or respond to this particular antigen. And if it does, then you can make an assumption that this is something you've been exposed to. Isogenics does one, it's an expanded Western blot, and they do some PCR testing as well. PCR testing is some genetic profiling to see if the organism shows up. You can also use Fry Labs. They do some staining, I'm not sure if they do culture, but they do some PCR testing as well. Galaxy Labs is pretty good. They do an ePCR test, which is very specific for Bartonella. They're a really good job of picking this one up. And this one is another co-infection that comes in a lot of times with Lyme. To gain the whole picture of Lyme, a practitioner should consider gathering information on the following areas. And again, Lyme disease is not a test or a condition or disease that you make a diagnosis from a lab test. So you should always look at the entire picture of the person to see what's going on. Clinical history and symptoms are going to be paramount to what the person has, and putting the pieces together that can point this back to Lyme. We use a Lyme questionnaire by Dr. Richard Horowitz, does a very good job of establishing if some of these symptoms are pointing towards Lyme versus something else. You can also do bioresonance testing, muscle testing. We do this in our office to screen the body to see if this is a problem. And again, you can rule in more with lab testing to go a little bit deeper. And a lot of times we find trends in lab work that point us to your body's dealing with Lyme or a possibility of dealing with it. With all that said, let's get to the meat of the issue, which is what everybody wants to know. How do we combat this? How do we improve the body to get the body better? We're going to look at 10 ways that we can combat Lyme disease. First one's going to be know your genetics, and this is important. We're understanding more and more about genetics today. You want to obtain a kit from 23andme.com. They do a phenomenal job of sequencing all 23 chromosomes, and they give us your genetics. And typically, I have patients upload this to mthfrsupport.com. Dr. Ben Lynch's site does a phenomenal job of piecing all these genes together to give us a good picture of your physiology or a blueprint of your physiology so we have a better idea of what we're up against. You can also look for key SNPs, and what SNPs are single nucleotide polymorphisms, and that's what this test is looking for. And they impair multiple different things. They can impair your ability to detoxify. So again, a big issue for Lyme patients is going to be detoxification. And some people have some genetic inability to do that. They just don't have good genes to allow them to detoxify. So a couple of sequences that we look at, and there are multiple other ones that we do. MTHFR is a big one. This is the thing that converts over folic acid to 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. MTRR, which works on your B12 synthesis to kind of help combat and lower homocysteine levels. COMT, which is your catechol methyltransferase. This enzyme is key. It's really one of those that can wreak havoc on people. It's a good one that kind of helps you to generate SAMe, works on some conversion of your neurotransmitters as well, and in your hormone metabolism. So this is a very important one that we look at. CBS is another one. CBS can really wreak havoc on your ability to detoxify. And it is theorized that Lyme messes with this particular enzyme, which is cystathione beta synthase. And so if you get that messed up, or you have 2 copies or even 1 copy, and you have Lyme, a lot of times we see patients kicking out high levels of ammonia. And part of that is due to this genetic defect, or as we call it in the office, misspellings. You can also have nitric oxide synthase, or NOS, which can mess your ability and drive more inflammation. Diamine oxidase, DAO, is another big one. You may not be able to break down histamine as well, and so these become very, very problematic for people. Number 2 is going to be removing the source. And common sources of health hazards that need to be removed are going to be amalgams. So if you have heavy metals or dental fillings that are metal in your mouth, you've got to get those out, because mercury just wreaks havoc on the nervous system, in addition to what Lyme is doing with inflammation. Food sensitivities, we've got to remove the big 3. For most people, are going to be gluten, dairy, soy. A lot of Lyme patients don't do well with sugar, so a lot of times we want to test to see, is your body having an issue here. We got to remove those to get you well. Mold is going to be another big one, and I always put mold here in the caveat with Lyme because they present completely the same in symptoms. So you cannot distinguish the two symptom-wise. So you could have mold and you look exactly like a Lyme patient. Only through lab testing can we delineate if it's mold or if it's Lyme. And so if you've been exposed to mold or currently being exposed to mold, you got to get out of that situation. If it's in your home, you got to leave. You got to, remediate that, get that out of there. It is going to wreak havoc on your body. EMF is another big issue, and we see this countless times with mold and with Lyme. The electromagnetic field that we're getting from technology, from Wi-Fi, cell phone towers, all these things really are bombarding the body and just really driving Lyme nuts. So we've got to work with the person to get that better as well. The third one's going to be regenerate the cell membrane, and this is your best bet to actually getting your nervous system healthy, because when you look at the brain, the vast majority of the brain is fat. We've got to heal the cell membrane, and when we look at that membrane, it's a phospholipid bilayer, just like our nervous system. So the cell membrane is mainly saturated fat and cholesterol. So a lot of times we have patients eating good sources of fat, and we also have them taking the right ratios of fat. And what they have found is the appropriate ratio for the cell membrane is a 4-to-1 ratio, and that's a ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. So countless times we've been pushing omega-3 on people, and we actually found the right ratio is an omega-6 to omega-3 being the right one. So you have to get the right oils in, healthy oils, not the trans fats and other oils that are denatured. You got to get the right ones. One that we use quite often in our office is Vista 1 and 2. This is a phenomenal one at healing the cell membrane. It works very, very well for patients. The fourth thing is we want to restore cellular energy, because many of you are run down and your mitochondria are not kicking out ATP because of all the inflammation that Lyme is producing. So the cell must generate enough energy from the mitochondria in order to heal. And the mitochondria is where all your ATP comes from. So that's your powerhouse of the cell. So without ATP production, your cells will not regenerate and you will feel exhausted and run down. One product that we use is eNRG. eNRG provides the necessary nutrients to improve that mitochondrial function to kick out more ATP. So this product works very well to kind of get that kick started for you. The fifth thing is we've got to remove inflammation. And this, again, Lyme is notorious for generating tons and tons of inflammation. We see it all the time. You can run a C-reactive protein, a SED rate. Sometimes you can go a little bit deeper into tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1, interleukin 6. We see these things constantly elevated with Lyme patients, and it's because this thing generates so much inflammation. So this is at the heart of keeping your cells from getting well. So the common sources include toxins, biotoxin accumulation from Lyme and mold. We can have dietary sugar and grains can really generate a lot of inflammation, and bad fats. So those are some things we have to really work on to get you well. Two products that we use quite often to decrease inflammation, and we use a whole host of other ones. I'm just giving you an example. Epic and Rox are superior antioxidants that help to reduce the oxidative stress that the body's under and helps to remove inflammation. The sixth thing we want to do is reestablish methylation. And going back to your genetics, this is what we look at. And we want to get your methylation up and running, as this is vital to turning on and off every process in the body. So this is going to turn on your good genes, it's going to turn off your bad genes. And so we have to get you methylating correctly, and that's why we run the 23andMe test. It's going to tell us how well are you methylating, or at least tell us the blueprint. We can look at physiology as well to see that happening. Product that we use sometimes to start people with is called MORS, and this provides you with the cofactors necessary for proper methylation and helps to drive more health to the cell. Seventh thing we have to do is support the immune system. The best fighting chance you have combating Lyme is your immune system. And this video is not on going into really detail about Lyme. We have another video for that. But this one, I just want to take a little moment to talk a little bit about antibiotics. And we don't prevent anybody from doing antibiotics if they choose to. The only thing you run into is it works well acutely. And if you can catch it early and get it, it just gives your immune system the upper hand. And that's typically what the antibiotics will do. They'll give your immune system the upper hand to get you on top of it. But ultimately what's going to kill this thing or get this suppressed is your immune system. And antibiotics typically too, once this thing has gone deep into the cell, they typically do not work on it. So a lot of times you got to get to the heart of it, you got to get things into the cell, and the antibiotics a lot of times can't penetrate really deep into the tissues, and some people just end up having a whole host of problems, and they usually wipe out their microbial flora too, so it can be pretty detrimental to them. The immune system is very complicated and requires various nutrients that we usually test for to get a healthier immune response. So we have to figure out what exactly your body wants to combat this. Nutrients pivotal to the immune system are going to be some vitamins that we just go over, and it's what we call ADEC, which is your A, D, E, and K. Your fat-soluble vitamins are very important. Zinc is another great one that's important. We do look at other B vitamins as well to kind of get your body methylating better. Herbal remedies are going to be vital as well. You can also use homeopathic, which we do in the office. Cat's claw, angiographis, chaga, all these things are really good to help the immune system fight Lyme and can help you heal and get the immune system stronger. The eighth thing is we want to remediate EMS, or the electromagnetic field. So along with chemical sensitivities, electromagnetic sensitivity is a major issue for Lyme patients and for mold patients. The electromagnetic field causes organisms to proliferate at a rate higher than normal. And the EMF that is responsible for this are the signals we're exposed to on a regular basis. It's going to be your 900 megahertz, 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz. Those things are just wreaking havoc on our bodies. It has a similar effect on our DNA as ionizing radiation. It doesn't knock out an electron from the electron cloud, but when you look at the damage to the DNA, it looks very similar to ionizing radiation. So this is a big problem for us, and if you're already predisposed to having things like Lyme and other things there, genetically you may not do well with the electromagnetic field. Typically, it's kind of like we can't remove you completely from EMF. So we have to work with your body, get your body well enough to where you can tolerate more and more, and it's not a problem for you. So we're never going to get rid of this because this technology is everywhere. We just want your body to be more in tune with it, more in line with it, and not being combative to it. So in order to recover, one must balance their electromagnetic field with the field they come into contact with daily. So this is something, again, we're remediating things at the home on you so that you can tolerate this and kind of coexist with technology. There are several ways to reduce the negative effect of EMF, but one cannot fully remove the exposure. Therefore, one must find balance. So again, that's what we look for. So we cannot eliminate you. You're not going to go out into the parts of Siberia to live because there's no electromagnetic field there. We're going to get you to where you can adapt in the environment in which you're living. The ninth thing is going to be detoxification, and detoxification is key to recovering from Lyme. So you have to make sure we get your detox pathways open and running. There's several pathways to detoxify, but some of the main ones that we look at that come into play are going to be CBS, which is your cystathione beta synthase, kind of working on your sulfation pathways. We want to make sure you're making enough glutathione with glutathione synthase, that's running okay. Phase 1 and Phase 2 of liver detoxification is also going to be important, making sure your oxidative stress is down so that your body has the best shot at detoxifying. In order to adequately detoxify, one must address your genetics, we have to address your nutrient status, and your toxic exposure. So the chemicals that you're using at home, we got to start removing those. The toothpaste, the hairsprays, the hair gels, the deodorant, all those things you're coming in contact with, your household cleaners, all those things, perfumes, you got to remove the toxicity from your body so your body can catch up and can do a better job at removing toxins. Detoxifying baths are very helpful. We use these for patients quite often. Epsom salt, hydrogen peroxide, and baking soda are great ways to detoxify at home. We have other ways too that you can nutritionally support your detoxification pathways. And the last thing that we look at is reducing the nerve stress that your body comes into contact with, because your nervous system coordinates and controls every system in the body. So in order for your body to heal, you must have proper activation to the nervous system. And the nervous system coordinates and controls every aspect of your body. So you've got to get this functioning to return. Nerve stress occurs at the facet joint of the spine. So lack of proprioceptive input from those joints happens as a result of trauma, stress, toxins, infection, nutrient depletion, EMFs, much more. It's pretty much everything we come into contact with on a regular basis. So this stress or this interference that occurs at the joint decreases the frequency of firing back to your brain. So your brain's not getting enough stimulation. So as proprioceptive firing is diminished to the brain's output to the rest of the body is going to be diminished as well. So it's kind of like garbage in, garbage out. If you're getting inadequate activation of the nervous system, the performance and output's not going to be good. So this translates to decrease in firing to the immune system, to your digestive system, to the endocrine system. It's just everything. Everything's affected by this. And what corrects this is the chiropractic adjustment. We've got to adjust the spine. We've got to release that joint fixation, get that proprioceptive input back in. We have to rehab your nervous system, getting the brain to fire again, because Lyme wreaks havoc on the brain. We've got to work on getting that back into balance. So chiropractic is a great way to do that, and we use this in our office, and we combine all these things that we've mentioned together to give you the best chance at getting well and recovering from Lyme. So how can I help? If you're serious about getting your life back and ending your suffering, call my office today. We really can help you. I truly believe that. If your commitment level, it has to be a 10. This requires a whole lifestyle change. This is not easy, but you know what? Many of you are suffering and you're just tired. You're tired of dealing with the same thing over and over again. It's the definition of insanity. It's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. You can't continue down the same path you're going down. You've got to change today. And today is the day that you're going to change. And we can help you with that. We can get you where you need to be, but I can't do it for you. That has to be you. You have to be willing to make that change and have that want to and that drive to do the things necessary to get well. And we're upfront with people, insurance is not going to cover this. And if they did, you wouldn't be watching this video, because many of you have insurance and yet you're still struggling. So they're not helping you. So insurance doesn't cover this because we go beyond what insurance covers. We go beyond and do more. It's not the standard of care. It's beyond the standard of care. We give you much more than what other doctors have done. So we actually go above and beyond the standard of care, and that's why insurance just doesn't cover this. We do have payment plans available though, and we typically let you know typical cost per month can range from $250 to $500, just depending on how bad situations are, how much we're up against. And if you're really sick, it's going to take longer, but we can help you with it. We can work with you in any financial situation that you're in. We'd be glad to help you. So again, if you mention this video, you can receive an evaluation and a report of findings for $60. We have our waiver here. If you decide to purchase additional treatment, you have the legal right to change your mind within 3 days and receive a full refund. Federal plans are excluded from this. This is Medicare, Medicaid, and this is a $200 value. So again, mention this ad when you call our office. We'll be happy to do an evaluation and go over a treatment plan that fits you and that what we can do to help you get better. Again, my office phone number is 919-662-0520. Call me today and be on your way to a new you. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.